She spent her birthday alone, no calls, no cake, not even a knock at the door until mine. I was just a flower delivery guy with the wrong address. But that day I found someone I never meant to meet, and maybe just maybe she found something she thought she'd lost forever. The apartment was quiet, too quiet for a birthday. Claire Bennett sat at the edge of her neatly made bed, still in the robe she'd pulled around her hours ago. A half-finished cup of tea rested on the nightstand, the kind she used to brew for two. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, touching the books on her shelf, the little wooden box that held old photographs, and the birthday card she'd written to herself the night before, just so there would be one. Happy 45th, Claire, it read in her neat cursive. You're still here, and that's worth something. She had no plans for the day, no guests, no cake, just the comforting lie of routine laundry, maybe a walk, and then dinner in front of an old movie she'd already seen. She stood, made her way to the window, and looked down at the street below, life moving on without her. A man with a dog, a couple arguing gently over a map, a delivery van pulling up to the curb. She turned away, and then knock knock. Claire froze. No one knocked anymore. She stepped into the hall, heart strangely loud in her chest, and opened the door. Standing there, drenched from the sudden spring rain, holding a bouquet of sunflowers and white roses, was a young man. His dark curls were dripping. His black t-shirt clung to his chest, and a sheepish expression bloomed across his face as he looked up from his delivery pad. Claire Bennett. She blinked. Yes. Oh, great. He handed her the flowers with a smile. Happy birthday. Claire stared at them, then him, then the card on the bouquet. To Carla Bennett, apartment 3B. She lived in 5B. The smile on his face slowly faded. Oh, he said, dragging a hand through his wet hair. God, I'm sorry. I must have hit the wrong button. Are you not, Carla? No, Claire replied, fighting a small, amused breath. But you're only 2 floors off. His face flushed. Classic me. It's my first week doing deliveries solo. My GPS told me you've arrived, and I just believed it like an idiot. She looked down at the flowers. They're beautiful, she said, even if they're not for me. He hesitated, then said, well, happy birthday anyway. Yours too, right? Claire tilted her head. How'd you guess? You answered the door in a robe. Your eyes looked exactly how my mom looks every year on hers, and there's confetti stuck to your slipper. Claire looked down. There it was, a single scrap from a party popper she'd used alone that morning, the one she told herself was just for fun. She laughed softly, and something inside her, a flicker of something long asleep, stirred. You're observant, she said. Comes with the chum? He shrugged. Flowers details. Moods? He paused. Look, do you want a coffee or something while I regroup? My next delivery isn't for a while, and I already look like a drowned cat. She blinked. Was he serious? I promise I'm not weird, he added, just wet and mildly embarrassed. Claire opened the door a little wider. Well, you're already here, and it is my birthday. Inside. Claire quickly tossed a cardigan over her robe and led him to the small kitchen. It was cozy, spotless, with a little radio playing faint jazz. Coffee's fresh, she said, and I have shortbread if you're into that sort of thing. I am definitely into that sort of thing. He sat at the breakfast nook, taking in the framed art prints, the old books stacked on the windowsill, the faint smell of lavender. This place feels like a hug, he said, almost without thinking. Claire raised an eyebrow. Not what people usually say about a widow's apartment. He looked up sharply. I'm sorry. She waved him off. Don't be. It's just the truth. He nodded. Still, I shouldn't assume. I'm Noah, by the way. Claire. He smiled, warm and unhurried. Claire. That fits. She poured the coffee, handed him a cup, and took the seat across from him. So she said, what's a young man doing delivering flowers instead of, I don't know, filming TikToks or trading crypto? He laughed. I'm a poet, actually, which is code for I have 3 side gigs and a lot of student debt. A poet, she repeated. That's unexpected. In a good way. She sipped her coffee. In a very good way. They talked longer than either expected. Noah told her about growing up with a single mom who used to write sonnets on grocery lists. Claire shared how she'd taught literature for years and how birthdays had once been loud, full of jazz and cake, and her husband Daniel's terrible singing. There was a comfort to it, unrushed, unforced, like a song she hadn't heard in years, but still knew all the words to. At one point, Noah asked, did anyone call you today? Claire hesitated. No, not this year. He looked down at his cup. I'm sorry, don't be, she said. You showed up even if it was a mistake. He met her eyes. Didn't feel like one. Eventually he stood. I should go. I'm pretty sure Carla thinks she got ghosted by a bouquet. Claire smiled. Tell her Claire says hello. He started toward the door, then paused. I left my pen somewhere around here. I might need to come back. She tilted her head. I don't remember you using a pen. He grinned. Me neither. But maybe I just want another cup of that coffee. She considered him so open, so unguarded, so different from the shadows she'd lived with since Daniel passed. Then come back, she said softly. No pen excuse needed. Noah nodded, holding her gaze a beat longer. Then he slipped out the door, and she stood there long after it closed. Later that night, Claire returned to the vase she'd placed on her windowsill. The bouquet wasn't hers, but he'd forgotten to take it. She smiled to herself and gently picked up the card. To Carla, it read in bubbly handwriting, but beneath it on the back was something new scrawled in quick, slanted ink. Happy birthday, Claire. You deserve flowers too. She pressed the card to her chest, heart heavy in a different way than usual. Not sad, not regretful, just aware that something had shifted, that a stranger had walked into her day and reminded her what warmth felt like. And for the first time in years, Claire didn't feel like she was waiting to fade. She felt like maybe, just maybe, something was about to begin. Claire didn't expect him to come back. Not really. Men like Noah Young, bright-eyed, full of temporary warmth, weren't the kind who lingered in the orbit of a woman like her, 45, widowed, stitched together with quiet routines and memories that hurt more than they healed. But one afternoon, just as the first signs of spring tapped at her window and the kettle started to boil, the buzzer rang. She stood in the hallway for a moment, frozen. Then she pressed the intercom. Hello? A familiar voice, a little too casual. Hey, delivery guy again. Think I left a very important pen somewhere in your kitchen. Claire's lips twitched. That imaginary pen must be feeling very neglected. I miss it terribly, Noah said. She buzzed him in. He arrived seconds later, less rain-soaked this time, though still in a hoodie too thin for the breeze outside. He had a small book under one arm and an awkward grin that didn't belong to someone who had accidentally dropped by. I brought coffee this time, he said, lifting a paper cup like a peace offering. Claire arched an eyebrow. So you didn't come back for the pen? He shrugged. I came back for the company. The words hung in the air for a moment. She let them, then said, Come in. The apartment hadn't changed since he'd last been there, but somehow it felt warmer now. Claire had lit a candle, put on a record, old jazz, Miles Davis, slow and thoughtful. They settled at the breakfast nook again. Noah set the book on the table, a battered collection of poetry. You mentioned you used to teach literature, he said. Thought you might like this. It was my mom's. She used to read it to me when I was a kid. Claire's fingers brushed the cover. You brought me your childhood poetry book. Well, technically, it's still hers, but she'd approve. Claire opened to a page one with notes scribbled in the margins in a woman's careful handwriting. She read a few lines silently, then closed it. Thank you, she said, her voice soft. He watched her for a moment, then sipped his coffee. So he said, Are you always this calm? Or is it just the jazz and cardigan? Claire chuckled. You think I'm calm? You've got this whole still water thing going on, but I bet there's a storm under there somewhere. Her smile faded just a little. There was. She stared into her cup. My husband Daniel used to say I was the storm. I'd rearrange the furniture while he was still sitting on it. I'd cook 5-course dinners on a Tuesday just because the sunset looked beautiful. I used to dance in the kitchen just because. Noah leaned in, elbows on the table, listening without interruption. I haven't been that person in a long time, she said. What happened? He asked gently. Claire looked at him. You're very direct. He gave a sheepish smile. I don't like small talk. She hesitated, then let out a long breath. He died. Sudden heart attack, no warning. One minute we were arguing about takeout, and the next? Noah nodded slowly. I'm sorry. I'm not, Claire said. Not anymore. I mean, I am, of course, but I've learned to live around the ache. You can only cry into your cereal for so many mornings before it feels like routine. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she added, I didn't think anyone would knock on my door again, especially on my birthday. It felt like the world had forgotten I was still here. Noah looked down at his hands, then up at her. I didn't forget. Claire's eyes flickered. You didn't know me, she said. I do now. Later they moved to the couch. The candle burned low. The jazz kept playing. Claire told him about her old classroom, the chalk dust, the smell of old books, the way teenagers lit up when a poem finally clicked. He told her about open mics and heartbreaks and how writing made him feel less invisible. And then somewhere between stories and shared silences came a question neither expected. Why are you really here, Noah? He looked at her and told the truth. Because you look like someone who deserved company, and I wanted to be the one to give it. Claire felt something tighten in her chest, a thread pulling loose. You're too young for me, she said quietly. He smiled. Too young for what? She didn't answer. He didn't press. As Noah left that night, a neighbor 2 doors down opened her door and eyed them. Claire stiffened. The woman gave her a knowing smirk, then disappeared. Claire muttered under her breath. People talk. Noah glanced back unbothered. Let them, she raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. I've been called worse than a guy who brings coffee to a beautiful woman. She opened her mouth half to correct him, half to deflect, but stopped. Instead, she said, next time knock twice. The buzzer's finicky. He grinned. So there's going to be a next time. She didn't answer directly, but she smiled as she shut the door, and when she turned around, the apartment didn't feel so quiet anymore. It started raining again, not the soft, poetic drizzle of spring, but a wild, unexpected downpour that rattled Claire's window panes like a storm demanding to be let in. She stood at her kitchen sink rinsing the last of the dishes and glanced out at the gray streets below. Everything was slick in silver umbrellas, flipping inside-out cars sending ribbons of water over the curb. But she wasn't thinking about the weather. She was thinking about Noah. Since he'd handed her a poetry book and told her without pretense or apology that she deserved company, she'd caught herself waiting not with desperation, but with a kind of quiet curiosity, like listening for a song she wasn't sure she remembered, but hoped she might hear again. When the buzzer rang twice like she'd asked, she didn't even hesitate. Noah stood in the hallway soaked to the bone holding a grocery bag with 2 containers of takeout and a ridiculous red umbrella that had clearly given up halfway through its job. Bad timing, he asked. Claire stepped aside, lips curling. That depends. Is there pad thai in that bag? Extra peanuts, he said, lifting it proudly. And spring rolls. I Googled your neighborhood favorites. You Googled me. I Googled the building. But now that you mention it, she shook her head amused. Come in before you catch pneumonia and blame me in your poetry. They ate on the couch, this time the containers balanced on coasters, the rain tapping out a rhythm on the windows. I almost didn't come, Noah admitted between bites. Claire glanced at him. Why not? Because I'm starting to like this too much. She paused, chopsticks midair. He didn't flinch. You ever meet someone and just feel like they've been a part of your life before you even knew their name? Claire's heart flickered. That sounds like something from one of your poems. It's real, he said. She looked down. You're young, 27, he corrected gently. Even worse, Noah smiled. You keep saying that like I'm made of plastic. I'm 45, Noah. So she hesitated. So we're from different worlds. Are we? He asked softly. Because when I'm here, it feels like the same one, Bun. Claire opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The words were there somewhere tangled in fear and longing, and all the ways she'd taught herself to stay safe. So instead of answering, she changed the subject. Why poetry, she asked, gesturing to the book he'd left with her. Noah leaned back, letting the question settle. My mom wrote poems on everything he said, napkins, grocery lists. One time I found a haiku inside my lunchbox. Claire smiled. She used to say that poetry is what happens when regular words can't carry the weight anymore. He continued, when feelings are too big for sentences. So I started writing my own, mostly to talk to her after she died. The smile faded from Claire's face. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He nodded. Cancer. Claire reached over without thinking and touched his hand, just a brush, just for a second. But the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Later, Noah asked, do you ever think you're allowed to fall in love more than once? Claire looked at him startled. He added quickly, I mean in general in life. She stared out the window. Rain streaked the glass like threads of silver. I think she began, then stopped. He waited. I think love changes shape. It doesn't disappear, but it doesn't stay the same either. After Daniel died, I thought my heart had finished its job like it had loved as much as it ever could. And that was it? Curtains closed. She looked at him. But now you're here and I feel, her voice cracked. I don't know what I feel. Noah's gaze was steady. That's okay. You don't have to name it. She laughed through her tears. You really are a poet. Would it be weird if I said I want to write about you? Claire blinked. What? Not about you, he clarified, but inspired by your stillness, your sadness, the way you let the light in, even when you don't realize it. Claire's breath caught in her throat. I don't know what you're doing to me, she whispered. He reached over and gently took her hand again, this time holding it. Maybe I'm just reminding you that you're still alive. The rain didn't stop that night, neither did the conversation. And when Noah finally stood to leave, Claire followed him to the door, her fingers still tingling from his touch. Claire, he said before stepping into the hallway, if you ever want me to stop coming, just say so. She looked at him. Young, yes, but real and gentle and brave in a way she hadn't seen in anyone for a long, long time. I don't want you to stop, she said. He nodded, smiled, and left without another word. But he didn't need to say anything because that night, as she sat alone on the couch with the remnants of their dinner and the soft echo of their laughter, Claire knew something had changed. She wasn't just waiting for life to happen anymore. It had already started again, and this time it had knocked on her door by mistake. Claire didn't open the door right away the next time Noah buzzed. One afternoon just before sunset, she froze in her hallway, heart pounding. He knocked once, then twice. But this time she didn't answer. She stood there, barefoot on cold tile, staring at the wood like it was a decision she didn't know how to make, and eventually he left. She watched him go from the upstairs window, his figure getting smaller as he walked away without turning back. It wasn't that she didn't want to see him. It was that she did too much. Since the night of the storm, since the way he'd held her hand and made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years, Claire had been floating untethered, like some old part of her was waking up and stretching its arms after too long in the dark. But she also knew what happened to people who let hope get too close. It hurt when it left, and eventually it always did. The apartment felt colder that night. Her book stayed closed. The record player sat silent. She made tea but didn't drink it. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was punishment. Later, she found a note slipped under her door. I get it. You're scared. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't too. But for what it's worth, I haven't felt this pulled to someone in a long time. Maybe ever. N. Claire held it in her hands for a long time. She almost ripped it in half, almost threw it away, but she didn't. Instead, she folded it carefully and placed it between the pages of the poetry book he'd given her, page 47. The one where the line read, "And still I chose to stay even when I feared the fire might consume me." One day she went out not far, just to the corner bookstore where no one knew her name. She walked the aisles like someone looking for shelter, more than stories. And then without meaning to, she turned into the poetry section. There it was again, that tug, that invisible thread. She sat on a bench in the back and let the poems wash over her. One of them made her cry quietly in public. It wasn't dramatic, it was just real. That night, Claire sat in bed with her phone in hand, thumb hovering over Noah's name. She didn't call, but she didn't delete him either. The next morning, the doorbell rang. No buzzer, no text, just a knock twice. She opened it without thinking. There he was, hair windblown, coffee in one hand, a paper bag in the other. I figured if I was going to be ghosted, I might as well deliver breakfast first. Claire stared at him. You're relentless. I'm patient, he corrected, and slightly addicted to your company. She stepped aside. Come in. They ate on the floor just like that first day, except this time the air between them was thicker and heavier, like something unspoken had taken a seat at the table too. I got scared, she said suddenly. Noah didn't look surprised. I know. You're young. This isn't supposed to be real. He leaned forward. Claire stopped deciding for both of us. She blinked. I know what this looks like, he said. Believe me, I've heard the voices in my head, the ones that say you're too old for me, or I'm too inexperienced for you, or that this whole thing is some fantasy we both stepped into by mistake. He took a breath. But I keep showing up because the way I feel when I'm with you, it's not a mistake, and it's not some fling I'll forget next month. Claire's the throat tightened. You don't know what it's like to lose someone. No, I don't, he said. But I know what it's like to be lost until someone opens the door. His voice softened. You make me want to stay. Claire looked at him, really looked, and then she whispered, I don't want to lose you too. Noah reached for her hand, then don't. Later they sat in the armchair by the window, her legs draped over his lap, a blanket over them both. He read to her from the book she'd hidden his note in. She didn't mention that she'd kept it. He didn't ask. The world outside was still uncertain, but inside this little apartment, time slowed down and Claire let herself lean her head against his shoulder. For once, she didn't think about how it would end. She just let herself feel it. The morning started with tulips, not roses, not lilies. Tulips, bright, blushing pink, the exact kind Claire used to plant with Daniel in the spring. They stood in a glass jar on her kitchen table, and next to them, a note. Happy birthday again. I remembered this time. N. Claire smiled. This time the smile didn't ache. It didn't carry guilt or hesitation. It simply was. Since the mistaken knock, it had been months of coffee on her porch, months of reading poetry out loud, months of letting someone in into the quiet, into the wounds, into the everyday things that made up her life. There had been moments of doubt, moments where she wanted to pull away, tell Noah to go find someone with fewer cracks and less history. But every time she pushed, he stayed, not because he was trying to prove anything, but because he genuinely liked her. All of her, even the sad parts, especially the sad parts. That night, Claire stood in front of the mirror in a soft black dress. Her hair was pinned loosely, and for the first time in years, she had put on lipstick, not for vanity, not for approval, but because she wanted to feel radiant. She did. Noah picked her up, not with flowers, but with vinyl records tucked under his arm. Jazz night, he said, at your place. She blinked. What happened to dinner reservations canceled? I figured if I was lucky enough to have you, I didn't want to share. She laughed. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously in love with you, he said, matter of fact. She froze, her lips parted slightly. He didn't panic, didn't try to take it back. He just stood there, honest and open. Claire reached out and gently touched the collar of his shirt. Say it again. He leaned closer. I'm in love with you. This time she kissed him first. They danced in the living room, no shoes, no audience, just two people swaying to Coltrane in the warm amber light of her favorite floor lamp. It wasn't perfect. Noah stepped on her toe. She snorted mid-kiss. The record skipped once, twice, but it felt like magic, not the kind with fireworks and crescendos, but the kind where your whole world softens because someone else is holding the sharp edges with you. Later, as they sat curled up on the couch, Clara asked the question she'd been quietly circling for weeks. Do you ever think we'll fall apart? Noah looked at her. Maybe. Maybe not. She raised an eyebrow. I can't promise we'll be easy, he said, but I can promise I'll never walk away just because it gets hard. He took her hand. I want to be in this with you. Not in theory, not in secret in life, the kind where we argue about what to cook and who used the last of the toothpaste. Claire blinked back emotion. I used it this morning, she confessed. I know, he grinned. I brushed with baking soda. She laughed, nose crinkling, and he kissed her like it was the last chapter of something that had taken years to write. One day, Claire did something she hadn't done in a long, long time. She invited her sister over. She introduced Noah not as a friend, not as a photographer she'd met, but as someone she loved. It wasn't easy. There were looks, questions, long pauses. But Claire stood tall because for the first time since Daniel's death, she wasn't trying to live in his shadow. She was choosing herself. Choosing now. Another day they walked through the park, hand in hand. And as they passed a small flower stand near the bench where Noah had first sat after the mistaken delivery, Claire stopped. She bought tulips this time for him. No note, just a look that said, you changed everything. Noah smiled, lifted the bouquet to his chest and whispered, I'd knock on your door 100 times if it led to this. Claire leaned in, pressed her forehead against his and replied, you don't have to knock anymore. Claire and Noah's story teaches us that love and connection can find us when we least expect it, often in life's quiet, overlooked moments. Clara Widow, convinced her heart's story had ended, was alone on her birthday until Noah's mistaken knock brought flowers and warmth to her door. His persistence, returning with coffee, poetry, and unwavering presence, shows that healing begins when someone sees us, truly sees us, and chooses to stay. Their bond, built on shared silences, jazz, and honest words, reminds us that age loss or fear needn't close the door to new beginnings. Noah's courage to embrace Claire's past and present, and Claire's bravery to let love reshape her life, inspire us to remain open to unexpected connections. In a world rushing past solitude, this story urges us to pause, to knock on someone's door, literally or figuratively, and offer kindness. Life's magic lies in these small, brave acts that rekindle hope. Have you ever had a chance encounter that changed your life, or been the one to bring light to someone's day? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this moved you, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to join our community of heartfelt storytellers. Let's keep spreading the beauty of connection, one knock at a time.